The front door was already off its hinges when Jake burst through the kitchen with a 12-gauge in hand. He didn't say a word, just met his brother's eyes, nodded once, and moved toward the back entrance. Cal was crouched low behind the old oak dining table, sweat dripping down his back, one eye on the cornfield through the cracked kitchen window. The July heat baked the Missouri plains, but inside the farmhouse the cold edge of danger made the air sharp. "They're here," Jake muttered, chambering around. 4 of them, 2 with rifles, 1 with a damn machete. Cal didn't flinch. "I saw the van. Black Chevy, no plates, same ones from last week." Outside, the stalks of corn shifted unnaturally, too heavy, too quick. City men never learned how to walk through a field without giving themselves away. "Should have burned the crop," Cal said under his breath. Jake snorted. "And lose the one thing keeping this farm alive?" "I'm talking about their crop, Jake. We should have lit that whole patch of cartel weed on fire the moment we saw it." Jake glanced back at his twin. "And start a war? We're already in one." A thud, sharp, metallic, rattled the screen door. Then a voice thick with a Mexican accent and confidence soaked in violence. "Farm boys, we just want to talk." Jake and Cal looked at each other. No fear, just blood-bound trust forged over 3 decades of hard work, lost parents and brutal winters. "You boys got lucky last time," the voice continued, "but luck, it runs out." The twins moved as one. Jake slipped toward the barn out back, boots silent on dry dirt. Cal stayed inside, loading slugs with calm precision. Every move they made was second nature. This land wasn't just their home. It was a battlefield they knew down to the inch. Outside, the leader of the intruders signaled, "E." 2 men split off toward the side, one creeping toward the hayshed, the other circling around the well. The machete wielder stayed at the front, grinning. The moment he stepped onto the porch, the wooden plank gave a creak, just enough. Cal fired through the screen. A single slug ripped through the chest of the machete man, sending him tumbling into the dirt. Screams echoed from the cornfield. Jake struck from behind, swift, brutal. The first rifleman didn't even turn before Jake's shotgun connected with his spine. The second fired wildly, grazing Jake's shoulder. He didn't flinch. He ended it clean, like a butcher with a job to do. The last man ran. Jake led him. Back inside, Cal stood over the body on the porch, hands trembling but eyes calm. "We bury them deep," he said. Jake nodded, pressing a shirt to his bleeding shoulder. "And we burn the field." They were just farmers, but they were also something else, something these narcos hadn't counted on. The fire started just before dawn. Jake stood at the edge of the north field, the sun a faint smudge on the horizon. He lit a match with his thumb, letting it flicker in the wind. In his other hand, a glass bottle filled with diesel and a soaked rag. Cal stood a few feet behind him, watching silently, shovel in hand, clothes still stained with blood from the night before. "Last chance to back out," Jake said, voice flat. "Last chance was yesterday," Cal replied. Jake dropped the match. The flame caught fast, licking up the rag and into the weeds below. Within seconds, fire devoured the rows of illegal marijuana someone else had dared to plant in their soil. The cartel hadn't asked. They never did. They just showed up 2 months ago, leaving threats, bribes, and dead animals by the fence. That was their way of negotiating. Cal turned away from the smoke and heat, eyeing the barn. "What if more come?" "They will," Jake said, no hesitation. "But we're not going to wait around with our hands tied. We fight on our land, on our terms." They buried the bodies by the creek, just beyond the rusted-out silo no one used anymore, wrapped in tarps, under 6 feet of clay and limestone. Not ideal, but it would hold for a while. The dogs stayed restless, sniffing the air, barking at shadows. Inside the farmhouse, Cal opened their late father's gun safe. Dozens of weapons lined the interior, most legal, some not. Old Man Tucker had been many things: a Vietnam vet, a drunk, a survivalist, and a father who taught his sons how to shoot before they learned how to read. Jake lifted a Remington 700 from the rack. "You think Dad knew this would happen?" "No," Cal said, checking a box of shells. "But he knew something would." They packed the weapons into the truck along with water, canned food, and a handheld radio that still worked if you hit it just right. The plan wasn't to run, it was to prepare. By midday, the fire had consumed everything. No evidence remained of the cartel's claim, just scorched earth and a warning etched into the land. But it wasn't over. At 4:32 p.m., Cal's burner phone buzzed. No caller ID, one word in the text. Mistake. Jake read it, jaw tightening. They're watching. Cal nodded. Let 'em. A pickup rolled down the gravel road. An old friend, Bobby Weller, from the neighboring farm. He looked nervous as hell. You boys stirred up something ugly, Bobby said, not even bothering with hello. Words getting around. Someone paid Sheriff Dan a visit this morning. Said they were federal consultants. No badges, just suits and eyes that didn't blink. Jake looked toward the horizon, the sky turning orange again. Not from fire this time, just the promise of night. Let them come, he said. They'll see who they're really dealing with. The basement was quiet. Too quiet for a house that had seen so much blood in 24 hours. Jake and Cal sat at the old pine table beneath the naked bulb, the same one their father had installed in '93 after the first tornado took the roof. Between them lay a map of the county, a compass and a stack of photos, black and white, cracked at the edges. One of the photos showed a young man holding an M16 in a jungle somewhere near Da Nang. Their father, 20 years old, smiling like he didn't know what death was yet. You remember what he told us about the cave? Cal asked. Jake nodded slowly. Off Old Cutter's Trail, half a mile past the creek bend. No one's been up there since high school. Exactly. They folded the map and started prepping. The cave wasn't just a story. It was their father's escape plan, carved into rock and memory, stocked back in the 1980s with ammo, rations and things no farmer had any business owning. Outside, the wind stirred the burned field. Ash floated through the air like black snow, settling on the porch swing and the tire tracks that led out to the highway. Jake loaded the truck while Cal packed what cash they had into a weathered metal lockbox. Guns, tools, shortwave radio. They moved fast, every movement deliberate. They weren't running, they were falling back. Bobby Weller had been right. There was talk, too much of it. The kind of talk that traveled fast in small towns like Morgan Hill, the sheriff now compromised. The local mechanic refusing to look Jake in the eye that morning. Even the feed store cashier acted skittish, her smile fake and eyes darting to the front window like she was being watched. You think this thing's bigger than we thought? Cal asked as they drove down the service road. Jake kept his eyes on the gravel. I think it's already in our backyard. At the edge of the woods, they parked the truck and moved on foot, cutting through the overgrown brush and thorns. The cave entrance was hidden behind a fallen sycamore and covered in decades of moss and silence. Cal pulled back the cover, and the cold air rushed out, metal, earth, and history. Inside, everything was just as their father had left it. Crates of MREs, stacks of ammunition, radios, a Polaroid of their mother taped to the wall beside a handwritten note. If you're reading this, things went real bad. Jake stared at it, hands clenched. They messed with the wrong damn family, he said. Back at the farm, a black SUV pulled into the driveway. Tinted windows, no plates. The back door opened. A man stepped out, well-dressed, clean-shaven, and holding a briefcase. He didn't look like a cartel member. He looked like someone worse. The wind picked up again, and the ashes swirled. The man in the suit didn't knock. He simply walked up the porch steps, paused at the shattered front door, and stepped inside like he owned the place. He moved with eerie calm, eyes scanning each detail. The bloodstains, the burned maps on the table, the overturned chair. He crouched beside the broken shotgun shell on the floor, picked it up delicately, and rolled it between his fingers like it was a clue in a puzzle he'd already solved. Outside, two more men waited by the SUV. One leaned against the hood, chewing toothpicks. The other stood stiffly, arms crossed, his earpiece barely visible. They weren't cartel, they weren't local cops. They were something in between, wrapped in the illusion of law, but radiating something far colder. Back in the cave, Jake and Cal sat by the battery lamp, listening to static hum from the shortwave. Every few minutes, Jake would tune it slightly, searching for movement in the white noise. We've got maybe 4 hours before they realize we're not at the house, Cal said. You think that's enough time? Jake didn't answer. He was staring at the note again. If you're reading this, things went real bad. There's more, he muttered. Cal raised an eyebrow. More what? More to what Dad left behind. He didn't just stock this place for hiding, he built it for something else. Cal stood and scanned the walls. Sure enough, behind a stack of old paint cans, he spotted a small metal hatch built into the rock. It was camouflaged, covered with dust and black mold. He reached out and twisted the rusted handle. It creaked open to reveal a narrow compartment. Inside, a sealed folder stamped "Classified Depth of Defense." Jake took it slowly, hands tight. The folder was old, the paper yellowed but still intact. Inside were documents, maps with red ink markings, and a single folded letter addressed to Jacob and Caleb Tucker. Open only if you're in deep. Cal read it aloud. Boys, if you're reading this, you've found the storm. I kept secrets. I had to. After 75, I worked for people who don't officially exist. We made deals, moved cargo, erased threats. I left that life when your mama got pregnant. But people like that, they don't forget. If someone came back here, it means one of those deals went south and now it's on you. Cal dropped the letter, stunned. Jake just nodded. So that's why the cartel's here. Not for weed. Not really. They're here because of something Dad did. Back at the farmhouse, the man in the suit lit a cigarette and stepped back outside. He didn't look frustrated. He looked patient. He tapped once on his earpiece and said calmly, "They're off the grid. Initiate phase 2. Use the local assets." As the SUV drove off, the air grew still. Bobby Weller's tractor sat motionless in his field a mile away, but Bobby was no longer in it. The next morning, the cave was silent except for the soft crackle of static and the occasional buzz of a fly trapped in the lamplight. Jake hadn't slept. He sat cross-legged on the stone floor, flipping through the Department of Defense folder, his fingers tracing every redacted line. Cal returned from outside, breath short. Drone, small one, came over the treetops about 20 minutes ago. I buried it in the creek, but it got close. Jake didn't look up. They're using civilian tech, probably patched through local eyes. You think they're watching through town? They're using the town, Jake replied. Local assets. That's what the suit meant. They both knew what that meant. The people they grew up with, their neighbors, friends from school, Bobby Weller, all of them could be compromised, either paid off, threatened, or worse. The cartel had money and reach. But whatever shadow Jake and Cal's father had tangled with in the past, that went deeper. Jake pointed to a map. There's a substation out near Miller's Creek. Power grid connects half the valley. If we knock it out, they'll lose cameras, communications, maybe even drones. You're talking about a blackout, Cal said, eyes narrowing. That's escalation. Jake looked up. They killed Bobby. Cal went quiet. They'd found the tractor an hour earlier while hiking out for recon. Engine still warm, tires spinning slowly in the dirt. Bobby was gone. Only the smear of blood on the seat and a shell casing left behind. Jake stood. We wait, we die, we move, we fight. Cal picked up the bolt cutters and a gas can. Let's get to work. By late afternoon, they reached the substation. It was unguarded, just chain link and rust. Cal clipped the lock while Jake poured gas over the central converter and wiring. They didn't speak. They knew the risks. Before they lit it, Cal paused. This changes everything. It already has, Jake said. The fire lit fast, crackling through wires like a fuse. Within minutes, the valley below went dark. Houses, stores, streetlights, blackout. At that exact moment, a convoy rolled into Morgan Hill. 2 black SUVs and a silver sedan. The man in the suit stepped out, flanked by 2 agents and 1 new face, Sheriff Dan. Dan looked rough, eyes red-rimmed, shirt soaked in sweat. He was talking too fast, hands trembling. I don't know where they are. Nobody does. They've always been different, quiet, kept to themselves. The man in the suit just stared at him. We'll find them. With or without your help. Back in the woods, Cal and Jake watched from a ridge. Cal lowered the binoculars. They brought the sheriff. Jake took a breath, steady and slow. Then no one's safe. Below them, Morgan Hill was going dark in more ways than one, and Jake Tucker knew deep in his bones that whatever storm their father had prepared for, it was only just beginning. Thunder cracked in the distance, low and rolling across the hills like a war drum. Jake and Cal crouched beneath a cluster of old oaks, soaked from a sudden summer storm. The blackout they caused had worked, but it also meant they were truly alone now. No lights, no signal, just instinct and firepower. Cal adjusted the strap on his rifle and scanned the distant glow of Morgan Hill. No traffic. No generators, dead quiet. Jake checked his watch. They'll start moving in from the west soon. They'll try to box us in. Cal looked at him. You think they'll use drones again? No, Jake said. They'll use people. People we used to trust. It hurt to say it. Even more to believe it. In the past 24 hours, everything had shifted. They'd gone from being just two brothers running a modest family farm to fugitives hiding in a cave full of military-grade weapons and buried secrets. Their father's past had caught up with them, and now it wasn't just Narcos they were fighting. It was something institutional, something older. Suddenly, static broke through the radio. Jake grabbed it. Say again? A voice. Scrambled. Male. Familiar. Jake, Cal, if you're listening, this is Bobby. I'm alive. Cal's eyes shot wide. Jake turned up the volume. They took me, staged the blood, the tractor. I'm in some kind of facility under the old mill. It's not cartel. These men, these suits, they're looking for something your father hid. Then silence. Jake slammed his fist into the dirt. They used him, lied to us. Cal's jaw tightened. That mill's on the other side of the ridge. You thinking what I'm thinking? Jake nodded. We hit it tonight. By nightfall, they were in position. The old mill sat hollow by the dried-up creek, its broken windows like black eyes watching the woods. But underground, something moved. A hum, faint but steady. A generator, an operations hub. Jake pointed toward the side entrance. You go in quiet. They'll create noise out back. Cal slipped into the shadows, vanishing into the trees. Jake waited 10 seconds, then stood and tossed a lit flare through the back window. The explosion wasn't huge, but it was loud enough. Inside, chaos erupted. Men with radios, flashlights, and drawn weapons rushed toward the back. That's when Cal slid through the side, past the office and into the stairwell leading down. Below ground, the facility was cold and sterile. Not cartel, not local. Government, maybe. Or something worse. Something between the cracks of official. He found Bobby chained to a chair, bruised but alive. Jesus, Cal, Bobby whispered. They're not after money. They're after data. Your dad stored it in an old signal tower outside town. They think it's proof of what he did overseas. Something he took. Cal cut the chains. Above them, the sound of gunfire erupted. Jake was buying time. We gotta go, Cal said, pulling Bobby up. Now. The old signal tower stood like a rusted skeleton at the edge of the valley, wrapped in vines and silence. It hadn't transmitted a thing in decades. Locals said it was decommissioned. Jake and Cal now knew better. They reached it just before dawn, Cal supporting Bobby, who limped and winced with each step. Jake was bloodied, his shirt torn from the firefight at the mill, but alive. He hadn't spoken much since they escaped. The only sound had been the crunch of boots and the distant approaching rotors of a helicopter. They're coming, Cal said, looking to the gray sky. We don't have much time, Jake nodded. Then we finish this. Inside the tower's base, hidden beneath a panel of old concrete and rusted bolts, was what their father had been protecting for decades. A sealed steel case marked with a military crest and the initials ARC, Advanced Reconnaissance Command. Whatever was inside, it was the reason for all of it. Jake opened it. Dozens of reels of classified tape, field reports, testimonies. Names, dates, all linked to covert operations in South America, missions that had officially never happened. The files painted a picture not of heroism, but of betrayal. CIA black ops, drug trade facilitation, and targeted political destabilization, all with signatures tying back to real names. One of them was Thomas Tucker, their father. He tried to expose it, Cal whispered. And they buried him before he could. Jake stared at the files. And now they're trying to bury us too. Bobby leaned against the wall, face pale. If that info goes public, it'll bring down more than just the cartel. It'll hit the government, contractors, arms deals, everything. We can't go to the press, Cal said. They won't believe us. They'll silence us. Jake closed the case and looked out the tower's slatted windows. The chopper was close now, and below it, black SUVs raced down the dirt road, kicking up dust clouds as they came. I know someone, Bobby said suddenly. Retired journo. Real old school, used to work for the Post. If we get this to him? Jake nodded. Then we expose everything. The tower shook slightly as the chopper hovered overhead. Loudspeakers blared. This is your final warning. Surrender now. Jake looked at Cal. One goes, one stays. No way, Cal said. We both go. But Jake was already handing him the case. You're faster, I'll buy time. There was no more arguing. Cal knew that look. The same look Jake had when they lost Mom. The same one when Dad got sick. Final, steady. Jake opened the tower doors and walked into the clearing with his arms raised, empty-handed, but unbroken. Cal, with Bobby and the case, slipped through the back trail into the trees, disappearing with the only thing that could break the chain of silence. Gunshots rang out behind them. Jake didn't fall. He ran straight toward the noise. Straight into history,